Hi, and welcome to my talk. Today, we're going to talk about some pretty cool stuff in Graylog. Thanks for taking the time to watch this presentation. So, what I'm going to talk about today is going from the hidden things in your network and utilizing some cool OS hardening techniques and exposing that through some advanced Graylog alerts. So, who am I? Professionally, built a 24/7 365 knock, built a 24/7 365 SOC and slash MDR team, and all the associated services with those like managed DDR, managed SIEM, etc. Built a digital forensics and incident response team, a DevOps team, a security engineering team, and helped out build an offensive security team as well. I've also worked in all or most of those positions and more. I also have an infrastructure background because I started on a NOC/service desk originally and kind of moved out that way, but I also was doing security pretty much the whole time. So who am I personally? Husband, father, hobbyist. I do have alpacas. Those are our alpacas and our sheep and baby doll sheep and all kinds of fun stuff. And I do 3D printing, hydroponics, home brewing, all kinds of fun stuff. Next thing is I was actually, before I recorded this, I was actually talking to somebody and a couple guys that I work with, in fact, and asked them for feedback. And literally one of them said that this talk was this meme at that point in time. So I had to give a little bit of a reference there to that because this talk is a little bit chaotic. Hopefully it's fluid, but there's a lot of information. And just note that at the end, I actually have all of this documented out. It's not going to be a talk where you walk away and you're like, how do I do this? I really I genuinely hope that you walk away from this and truly understand how to do these things. And if not, you'll have some reference material. So before we begin, just a disclaimer, in the next couple of sections, we're going to talk about a lot of really specific things. There's going to be examples of things, and those are really specific things that you can actually go back and put into your environment. And I encourage you to do so, but also think about how those were created, how those were done. Some of these things we're going to walk through the logic behind them and things of that nature, but don't just take them as blind one-to-one. This is an alert I can put into my environment. Here's this cool honey thing that I can put into my environment. Think about what I did in some of the ways that these came up, and apply that to your own environment, because there's a lot of ways that go beyond what I did here and what I'm going to be able to showcase here that you can really dig into or hone into that might be special or unique to your environment. And that's the funnest part, I think, of what I do every day, is finding new ways and new fun little, almost like quirky things that you can do to really identify things, right? Whether it be a threat actor or a red team or what have you. Those are the funnest things to me, is to find unique ways to apply things that are in your environment. So be aware of that. One of the other things I did want to mention, not part of the disclaimer, but part of the disclaimer is OS hardening is hard. We're going to talk about a couple techniques here. It's not the only techniques you should do, but we're going to talk about a couple techniques and how Graylog can actually help you with them, with those, whether it be implementing them or monitoring them afterwards, etc. Just know that, yeah, it's pretty easy to identify if an OS hardening technique is in place or not. A lot of times, in my experience, we watch organizations have a harder time actually implementing those. So in this instance, finding the issue is typically easy. Fixing it is kind of hard. But just note, last thing on this slide is it's better to break things on your own time than having a threat actor come in and break them, because at that point you don't have a choice, right? You have to fix it. And being on that IR side, I know firsthand how much of a disaster that can be to an organization. So what is OS hardening? We'll start off there. OS hardening is just their, basic configurations that are inside of an operating system. Today, we're going to talk mostly about Windows-based operating systems and their hardening techniques. Every OS has hardening techniques. It's not one. It's, some may have a little bit more security out of the box, or maybe they have a more secure version of it. If you have the option, go with those. But typically those you're gonna have more issues out of the gate, especially if you're less familiar with it. But just know a lot of these things we'll talk about, especially today, are going to be mainly left there for backwards compatibility, usability, and ease of use and deployment for that software to work anywhere seamlessly out of the box. So there could be some compatibility issues depending on the OSs that are in your environment. There could become challenges with deployment as you roll these out. The ones we're going to talk about today are pretty low likelihood of causing issues, though, so they're pretty safe. Which techniques are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about NTLM, specifically hardening to NTLM v2 plus, LDAP signing, which is the beginning to solve a fun little thing called petit potem. Our offensive security team loves that tactic. They really have a lot of fun with it. So we've obviously adopted that one. And LDAP signing will help you solve the beginnings of that. There are other configurations that you'd have to make specific to Active Directory to really truly solve it. That's the beginning of it. We're going to talk about SMB signing, broadcast, LLM&R, multicast DNS, and NetBIOS. And we're also going to talk about WPA-D. There's some bonus stuff after that that goes beyond just OS hardening techniques. But yeah, we'll get there. So why those tactics or techniques? They're common. They're everywhere. Working on offensive security, working in incident response, running a managed detection and response team. I see those things are just pretty much prevalent. They're everywhere. And especially with the broadcast ones, there's really not a use case for them anymore. Like, sure, there's arguments to be made around some of them for very specific scenarios, but for the majority of those, most people don't even know that they're there, and most people wouldn't even know if they were gone. So, like, a lot of these, they're not like they used to be, 10 plus years ago, where if you remove some of them, you may see issues. A lot of them you can put into place or remove or, harden those configurations, and you likely won't even notice the difference. Some of them are going to be a little bit more impactful. We'll talk about those as we go. And you can also make advanced fun stuff out of it too, which is what we're here to talk about. So just a note, I did write a little PowerShell script, again, focusing in on Windows-based OS hardening configurations. You can go out there to that GitHub. It's just a little tool. I called it Phantobyte. It literally just helps you put GPOs in place to help remediate. I think there's 24 hardening techniques in there. I think there's 26 total options. But it's a free tool. You can go out to GitHub. You can grab it. Review it. Obviously, you never know with anybody, but review it if you understand. I tried to self-document the whole thing, and it's there to, again, just really help you. Deep dive into each one of those hardening techniques before you roll them out, put them into a testing environment, so on and so forth. But again, it's just something to help make it a little bit easier to get more Windows-based OS hardening configurations completed in your environment. So we'll start with part one, which is the OS hardening stuff. So first step for NTLM v2 plus, I won't dig into what each of these are. Just don't have enough time for that today. Definitely take this and go out and do your own research into some of these. And some of these, there might even be, more modern by the time you're watching this. There could be more modern techniques, but right now today, this is one of the ones that we see quite a bit. So the first step is to check your logging levels. You're going to probably hear that with every single tactic and technique that we talk about today. You're going to want to review event IDs 4624, and you're going to want to look for these details. The key component here in a few minutes, you're going to see this very similar slide in a few moments, but a key component is obviously up on this screen. So what we can use Graylog for here is we can find those events. And the first step is identifying in your environment, discovering, if you will, what all is using NTLM v1 versus v2, right? So you want to assess that. You want to figure out how many devices do I have that are actually using NTLM v1 versus v2. Maybe if you're in a more modern network where there's more modern OSs like Windows 11, you might not see NTLM v1 a whole heck of a lot. So in that instance, by enabling NTLM v2 plus, enforcing that, I actually may not cause a single problem across my environment. However, if you run this and you see every single request is using NTLM-v1, you might want to look into your OSs and figure out what that's going to look like and how you need to transition that. So what you can use Graylog for here is really just start to grant you that ground and foundational understanding of how many devices are you going to have to, like, actually, you're going to have to remediate them all, but how many of these remediation efforts may cause a disruption in your environment. So it'll give you that quick snapshot at a glance by running that query, right? You can just do a quick pull of that event ID, pull a top or whatever, and grab all of the source IP addresses or host names, depending on how you have everything set up to log and how you have Graylog set up. Pull all of that. Now I have a list of all the devices that are on my network you can do it across, last 30 days, last 15 days, whatever, whatever time frame you have in there. Pull that. Now you have a pretty good list of where you're at. So let's say, now we push that hardening technique out, right? Boom, it's out there. What can we do with Graylog after the fact? Well, like I said, two back, it's pretty similar. So what you can do with Graylog is set up an alert for the package name. Look at that. If you ever see anything other than NTLM-v2 in that package name, for example, with this, kind of fairly this exact set, basically set an alert up. Now, that'll do a couple things. Number one, you got to think about it from a couple different angles and why that's important. So, number one, you'll be able to tell if a device pops onto your network that isn't hardened. Maybe you deployed a brand new device, or you're running from a golden image and you haven't made your golden image, you haven't updated it, you haven't added that OS hardening technique to it, or what have you. Now you'll be able to identify anytime a new device comes into your network that doesn't have that hardening technique, right? Now, that's key for a couple reasons. I just talked about a legitimate reason. I have this machine, new employee, giving it to the new employee, and we're going to go down that route, right? Well, what if a threat actor just walks in off the street and plugs into my network? That could give you an early indication of that. Maybe you're having a pen test done and you individually might not have been told about that, but all of a sudden a new device pops into your network with NTLM-v1 and it's trying to make NTLM-v1 connection or requests. That could be a pretty early indication, pretty big early flag, right? So the other thing about this, just to note, is in some environments, you're not going to be able to rip that out wholesale across the environment. So with that being said, you just have to be cognizant that you may not, you might have to allow certain devices to make those requests inside of your alert. So again, just something to note, but that's a quick, easy little win there, right? So you've hardened your environment, so you've pushed your security posture forward. But now you're also monitoring for that security posture. So you've kind of completed the life cycle of that. So now we're going to dig over to LDAP signing. LDAP signing is a fun one. So this one is really cool. This is a hard one to implement, especially if you don't have a SIEM. And here's the reason why. If you don't have a log aggregation or a SIEM or anything, right? We're Graylog Go here, so I'm hoping everyone here has Graylog, right? But if you don't have something, this one's actually kind of hard to do. So on every domain controller, you get event code 2887, right? And it goes off once every 24 hours. And what it'll do is it says, hey, here's how many devices in your network are either doing LDAP signing or binding, or it actually shows you the reverse of what I just said. How many machines are not doing LDAP signing and how many machines are not using binding. So you get these two little nice numbers. That tells you exactly how many devices in the last 24 hours made requests and didn't do those things. So that's really cool, right? And you don't need a SIEM solution to pop in and see that. But you have to check every single domain controller in your network. Now, some smaller networks, you might only have 2. Larger networks, you might have 10, 15, 20, 30, 40. So on and so forth, right? Depending on your environment. So if you have more, it makes it a lot easier if you have a centralized logging solution that's pulling all those down, and you can just peep that from Graylog. But further, once you want to really dig into that so that you know exactly, hey, which devices are actually making that? It's because I want to start enabling this, and I want to start pushing it across the board. So I start enabling LDAP signing across the network, or I want to dig into which devices are actually making the non-signed queries, not queries, but requests. So I want to dig into that. You can enable an event code 2889 on the individual. Again, you got to do it on each domain controller. And then it's a single log per connection as they happen, including the source IP address that made that connection. So as you start to push this out there, you can get that enabled on your domain controller, and you can look at that event log. And as you're enabling this across the board, you'll start to be able to verify, yes, my hardening is working. It's rolling out across the board. I'm seeing less and less and less and less and less machines with that, right? You might even look at that and go, oh, crap, that's a really old device. I may not be able to harden that, right? Or I'm unsure, that might be disruptive. So that'll also give you visibility into which devices are doing what on the whenever it pertains to those requests, right? So at the end of the day, that's what you're going to want to do there. And then at the end, what you'll want to do is continuously review that and set up alerts. If you want to maintain those event 2889s, those can be quite loud. So just be aware of that. They can, it's going to bump up your ingestions to some degree. Some environments are going to be, a larger increase than others based around how many requests are made. But at the end of the day, if you leave it enabled, you'll be able to track that in exactly the same manner that I just said before. So basically what you would do is set up an alert for a machine that is not using LDAP signing and or not doing binding once you get those two pieces put into place. And now all of a sudden, again, legitimate machine pops into the network. If it's a Windows 11, it's actually set up to either use LDAP signing or not use it. By default, typically, like it's a half kind of thing where if it's required, it'll do it. So you would just want to obviously enable it. If you see any requests that come across that are like, hey, this is trying not to use this explicitly, that's an alert, and you should be investigating that machine because, again, maybe you have a unauthorized device in your network. So SMB signing. This one gives a lot of people, if they've been around for a while, some heartburn. So SMB signing. Our red team literally rips around environments like on this. We've seen so many threat actors use this, right, to get all kinds of goodies. SMB signing is the old fear of implementing SMB signing was that it causes more requests. It does. Candidly, it does, right? Because you have a three-way handshake happening for each request now, as opposed to nothing. Hey, I'm who I say I am. Don't verify me, right? Like that's the big difference between SMB signing and not signing. So obviously you're going to have that. You're going to have an increase in requests. On most modern networks, though, I've never seen, if you're on a 10-100 network, maybe, but a modern, if you've refreshed your hardware in like the past 10 years, you're probably going to be fine. If not, then maybe you'll be a little bit more weary about this. But a very similar feel, a very similar thought process to SMB signing. You enable SMB signing, gives you visibility, you enable SMB signing and you can mitigate all of those things. So what you can do is you can hunt for SMB signing in the event logs. You can monitor for those requests, attempting not to use SMB signing. As you roll it out, same exact thing as what I said before, same process, right? And then for alerting, though, one fun thing about SMB signing is you can explicitly ask to not do SMB signing. So if you ever see those post-hardening in your environment, you have a non-authorized device on your network or a device that is not hardened. It's one of those two things. It's not, there's no other option for that one. So for SMB signing, it becomes really good for that one. It's a really juicy and fun alert. Now, whenever it comes to multicast broadcast protocols, I threw in a tool, Responder. You're going to hear that a lot out there. If you're familiar with it, you're familiar. If you're not, definitely check out that tool. It's a red team tool. It's really fun. It's super easy to fire up and enjoy on a network. Don't do it on a corporate network. Do it like on a home network. We'll talk about it here in a second, but just don't do it on a corporate network. Some of the ways that it works is it can look at LLM&R, multicast ENS, NetBIOS, and WPAD, which is going to be the next couple of things that we talk about here, right? So this is one of the ways to kind of help mitigate or detect or work against that. So LLM&R, local link multicast name resolution. All it is quickly is a if you look at pecking order of how DNS works, you have your local shadow, your whatever file, localhost. You have localhost on your device. It's going to look there and say, what's in my local host file? And if it's not there, then it's going to do an LLMNR broadcast and say to everyone in the network, hey, do you know what this is? If not, it's going to do multicast and all of that fun stuff. So these are just different things before they actually even ask DNS. Even if you have a DNS server in your network, LLMNR still kicks off. So just keep that in mind, right? And so one of the things that Responder loves to do is respond to those requests and say, oh, that's me, right? Hey, here's this DNS request. Hey, that's me, right? It doesn't even matter what it is. Hey, that's me. So all kinds of fun stuff you can do there. And all kinds of fun stuff all over the place, but all kinds of fun stuff you can do there. For LLMNR, you got port 5355. Put in an OS operating system firewall block on that and log the firewall to Graylog. That's the remediation there, right? For one aspect. You can also disable LLMNR. You can disable multicast DNS, and you can disable NetBIOS. There's again, I'll have guides for you guys out there. So basically, you just disable those, and once they're disabled, then you put in the OS firewall if you're using Windows, like Windows Firewall. If you have some other third party, like maybe micro-segmentation solution, put it in there. If you're using Linux, IP table, whatever, put those in there. And then log the firewall back to Graylog. And here's the important reason why. You should not see those requests from that device after you do the hardening technique. Now, I caveat that. And I caveat that because I have seen some of these get re-enabled after Windows updates. And so let's say you go through, you put it in there, and now all of a sudden you start getting a bunch of blocks. You dive into that machine to realize, oh, heck, Windows updates went off. This got re-enabled somehow. Crap, right? So that's what that's important for. But also, if you do that, if you start to see inbound blocks on those ports, that means, again, there's another machine that is either unauthorized or not hardened in your network. And you kind of see where I'm going with this, right? Maybe you don't have the ability to roll that out across the firewall. Maybe you don't want to just stop there, right? Security and layers. That's why I put that inline IDS, IPS and push that into Graylog. That is another great thing that you can do. And what you can do from there is look for those ports, that port activity, and pull it in and alert on that. So you can also get a little bit fancier with IDS, IPS solutions, whether they're free, whether they're paid. You can get more fancy with them. Like, I've never seen traffic on this port from this device, and all of a sudden that's a much higher fidelity alert. But if you're going through and doing these post-remediate, or you're going through and remediating these post-remediation, you should not see these happen. So if a device pops into the network and starts making requests on these ports, something's going sideways. Lastly, but not least, is a tool that one of my friends made called NetBait. And what it does is it's a PowerShell script. You can drop it on a machine. You have to leave. You can't actually remediate it on the machine. But what NetBait does, and if you're going to do this, it's a little honeypot style thing. What you're going to do is you're going to drop NetBait, again, PowerShell script, run it as a scheduled task, have it kick off every so often, maybe every 10 minutes or so. And basically what it'll do is it's going to make an LLMNR request. It's going to make a request. And if somebody has Responder in the network, it actually grabs what device responded back to it on. And so it's going to make basically like wild, responses to things that shouldn't exist in your network. You can mess with it and make it so it is making requests that are not in your network, so that it's not hitting something that is legitimate and sending you that every time. But then within a 10-minute time frame of Responder being fired up in your network, NetBait's there, and it's pulling that back into Graylog, and now you can alert on that. And that's a really high fidelity alert because you shouldn't have anything on your network that's going to respond to those requests. WPAD, as soon as you fire up, if you're If you're not sure what it is, WPAD, if you fire up Edge, if you fire up a browser, first thing it does is it says WPAD dot, and what it's looking for is a Windows proxy address. So in a large enterprise, back in the day, I'll say back in the day, you might have set up a WPAD server for you to basically proxy all of your internal browser traffic through. They never removed that, and so it's still there today. It's still there today. And again, Responder will respond back and say, oh, I'm your WPAD server. Yeah, that's me. Proxy all of your traffic through me, right? So there's a couple things to this that you can do. You can obviously disable it. There's some other fun, cool things that you can do that we'll talk about here in a second. But a super easy one is not only disabling it on all of your devices, but putting a DNS entry into your DNS server, whether that's your DC or whatever, put that in there and then log that server's DNS request over to Graylog and create an alert for WPAD dot asterisk, right? Anything that's going to hit that. So it'd be typically like WPAD dot, whatever your local internal network, domain name is, so acme.local. Or acme.com or whatever it is internal for you. So that'll give you a pretty quick win. Now, you're going to see a lot of noise there too. Devices that use WPAD that haven't been disabled are going to hit that. So you got to be careful. That alert has to come later after you've done that across the network, right? So once you get that in place and you have that down, boom, there you go. And then you also have to make sure that you rip that across the network. And then again, we come down to two scenarios. You have an unauthorized device on your network or a device that is not hardened, right? You can also IDS, IPS, again, same thing there. And then another thing that you can do is at your DHCP server, there's actually an option. And if you enable that option, it disables WPAD requests for everything that gets DHCP from that DHCP server. So another thing you can do is log unusual requests and look for, WPAD attempts there as well. And then lastly, but not least, you can enable HoneyD and listen for WPAD. And what you can do is provide a WPAD.dat file. And then what that'll do is anything that hits that and tries to go out there is going to be a suspicious host, right? So there's some really cool stuff that you can get by doing that. And again, thinking outside of the box, you can do so much cool stuff. So we kind of blasted through the first part, made it to the bonus fun part. I can't do this without having some demo of some sort, right? So I'm going to have a demo for this guy right here. This is one of my favorite techniques right now. I've talked about it quite a bit. So another tool set that's really hard to detect is Bloodhound. It's kind of funny that it's hard to detect because it's so loud. Like it goes at Active Directory and literally screams at it in the face. Give me everything you have right now, right? And so it's not an easy thing to do. And typical mentality, I'd say traditional mentality is look for bloodhound.exe, look for sharphound.exe, right? Look for the tool across my whole landscape. Yes, you can do that. I encourage that you put simple alerts like that into place. But we all know, I know, because Bloodhound was actually one of my favorite tools, and so was Responder. You would never catch me unless I was explicitly asked on a red team engagement. I would never run sharphound.exe. I'm going to today, by the way. I'm absolutely going to today. But it's just for ease of demo. But you would never catch me dead running sharphound.exe. I would have a custom executable with a custom name, with a custom process name firing, right? Like in an IOC or a hash that is brand spanking new every time I drop it on a device. So you think about that. And that's one tool that does that. There are other tools like 80Find and PowerView that also do similar things. And there's even more tools out there. So I sat down and reverse engineered. I started with Bloodhound, and all it does is LDAP queries. And then I transitioned over to 80Find to see what it does under the hood. Guess what? Same thing. You know what PowerView does? LDAP queries. You know what a lot of these tools do? LDAP queries. Cool. So what's next? LDAP querying, right? Like that's the right way to go. No. You can do that. And again, it's not something I discourage, but at the end of the day, whenever you enable it, what you're going to find out is LDAP query monitoring isn't complete. So you're only getting a portion of the picture, okay? And that's really, really important to understand, because if you don't understand that, you're going to think that you have complete monitoring there, and you just don't. So what do we do, right? It's kind of painted a bit of a really crazy and bad sounding thing there. Well, actually, we can create honey tokens, honey users, honey thingamabobs, whatever you want to call them. All it is, and by the way, just a note for this, you don't actually have to create new. You could use existing. I like to create new. And I'll show you why in the demo. I like to create new, and I'll show you why. But this can be applied to a user, a computer object. Most any of the objects that you'd create in AD, you can apply this to. All you do is enable advanced alerting, advanced configurations in logging, and do it for all read and all write to the objects. And now all of a sudden you get an event ID of 4662, and you'll be able to do cool stuff with that. So what kind of cool stuff? Well, let me stop sharing my screen for just a second here, and I'm going to pull up a quick demo. All right, so you see here I ran this just to test out, make sure it was going to be working for the demo. And we got Graylog here. So I'm just rerunning this right now. You can see there are no hits for this query. And we'll talk about the query here in just a second. And like I said, I'd never do this, never catch me dead doing it. Watch me do it. All right, so sharphound.exe, there is domain controllers here, and it's ripping and running. And yeah, I know there's different ways to run it. I could have done DC sync and been quieter. You know, for all intents and purposes, it really doesn't matter how you run it. I know that because I literally went to our offensive security team and I said, please throw everything that you have at me. I want to hunt you down, and I want you to use Bloodhound. Caught him every time. So I ran that. I just refreshed, and now you see all of this stuff. So don't mind this exists honey token field for a second. But basically what we're looking for is event code 4662. And then obviously, you know, we'd have to look for the object type. Now, whenever you look at this in the event viewer in Windows, if you're not looking at the XML, you're going to actually see the object type and the object name. And the object name is going to be the user account that you apply this to, or the object that you applied it to. So if it's a computer, the computer name, whatever. And so just keep that in mind whenever it comes across the Graylog, it won't be that way. So we did some fancy fun footwork here. And what we did is we took those, and this is the reason why I like to do it against their own accounts. A fun note here, spread these throughout Active Directory. Don't put them in one area. Put them all over the place. And the reason why you want to translate these using pipelines and lookup tables is because you'll know how widespread somebody's trying to hit you with their Bloodhound queries or their AD find queries versus how specific. Maybe they do know your environment a slight bit, and they're only looking to hit one OU. You know, so this will give you visibility into what did they just do? Did they just hit everything in Active Directory? Are they doing an initial, pass? Or are we trying to be a little bit quieter and more specific to, maybe we're just going to look at the OU called users, right? Like something a little more common to most people's environments. So you can translate those out to whatever you want them to be. And for me, fake user or fake computer account, right? For that particular one. And that's how quick it happens too, by the way. It's pretty quick. Let me transition back over to our slides here. All right. So we have those, and, we put them in place. So this is what I was talking about. You want to take that honey token that you've created, and you want to add it in there. So you want to basically translate what that GUID is over to a user account. But in that event ID, you'll also notice the user account name. So whatever account name ran, and you see mine there, cbuzzard, whatever account name ran Bloodhound in that environment, guess what? It's right there. So now all we have to do, candidly, is 4624 event log for that user account within the time frame that particular thing went off. And we have a pretty good idea and understanding of where that actually came from, right? It doesn't give you that detail inside of this initial log, but it's very easy for you to pivot over and identify where this came from for the most part. Like if that user's just blowing up, I mean, it's probably going to be pretty easy to see that this user's blowing up from this place. But, you know, if they're being real quiet and they just run that one bloodhound, might be a little bit harder. Just narrow it down to the time that that alert went off, right? It's pretty fairly immediate to when that was going off. And by the way, that sharp hound's still running right now. So it's still generating more noise. I think it runs for almost 5 minutes. So for me and my environment, right? So in some environments, very rapid. Some environments takes a lot longer. The larger your organization, the more user accounts, the longer it takes that tool set to run. But here's the beauty. You run AD Find, you run Bloodhound, you run Sharphound, you run PowerView, Manage Engines AD tool. A lot of these things are also going to trip this. So be aware of that. If you have an AD tool set, an IT tool set in your environment that runs and pulls these things, you're going to have to allow list that as part of your alert. But after that, you're going to be able to detect Bloodhound or a similar tool set that is outside of that very rapidly. So you got to get fancy with it. RC4s, Kerberos detection. So for this one, this can be painful for some organizations, but it all starts with event code 4769. Run that query that I have right there, when is, you know, it might be a bit of a different field in your environment, but the RC4 HMAC, that will help you seek those out, right? You want to find all of those in your environment. You want to remediate those. Basically what you want to do is transition them to like AES 256 plus if and where possible. You might have like an old generator where you can't do that and it has to stay RC4. What I'm going to say, let the corner cases be the corner cases, especially for this one. If you have Kerberoastable accounts, threat actor, pen tester comes in, that's boom, they're going right after that. That's easy pickings for them. That's so simple. So you look at that, you want to get rid of, if not all of them, as many as possible. And then what you want to do is you want to put a threshold volume limit, like basically a rate limit alert in place for those devices. I should only ever see this device, my HVAC system, it logs in twice a day. I should never see, maybe it logs in more times, maybe it logs in 24 times, once every hour. Whatever it is, however many times it is, a lot of these, I mean, most of them realistically should be service accounts, which means that they should be like a robot, essentially, right? They should happen at a scheduled time and log in at a scheduled time, etc. So you want to baseline that. You want to look at it and say, okay, it logged in 24 times today, yesterday, the day before. For the last 30 days, it's logged in 24 times a day. I want an alert on the 25th login. I want an alert on the 26th login, right? Now, all of a sudden, if somebody grabs that and starts to do Kerberoasting, you should catch them. If you're lucky and you get all those RC4s out of your environment, do you know what we're going to do now? We're just going to set up alerts for non-allowed, or we're going to set up alerts for RC4. Boom, done. That's what we're going to do, right? So that's kind of the fun. That's kind of the fun part of RC4s. All right, now this is really fun. I'll pick on a brand just because I know it, used it in the past. Back in the infrastructure days, right? So advanced backup alertings. This is really key. So again, working IRs, I've seen this happen time and time again. I've worked on and built a NOC that, you know, they deal in failed backups and kind of seen all sides of this one. So what you want to do here is start by document. All this stuff should be documented that we talked about so far today. You really, that's the key component to a lot of this stuff, is documentation. But if you do this right now and you document your backups, oh boy, this is a powerful one and it's fun. And then it translates over, and we'll talk about that here in just a second. But basically what you want to do with your backups, and to create a really good and powerful backup alert, you want to document the IP addresses for your backup server or servers. What is the login type? What is the auth type, right? Back to the NTLM v2. What successful daily rate, right? I just talked about this with RC4s. What is the successful login rate? How many failures do you have for that? Document your domain name. All the login volume things that you can think of, right? So let's talk about this. And I'm going to use Veeam as an example because, again, it's the one I know. So Veeam, login type 3, network. That's what your Veeam service account should use. your Veeam service account should be using NTLM v2. Your Veeam service account, let's say I have 10 servers and I take 2 backups of them a day. That's 20 backups a day. Guess what that means for your user account? It should have 20 corresponding logins. Now, that can be a little bit wonky if you do like application backups, because it might have to log in twice, technically speaking, to the application to do something with the application, say if it's Exchange. You know, back in the day, you had to cycle the DBs to get rid of the logs whenever you did a backup. So things like that may increase those amount of logins. And that might end up being an interactive login versus a network. So that's why this is a key thing to do, is to actually sit down and just ask these questions. All you have to do to ask these questions, pull up Graylog. If those logs are in there, start asking. 4624, show me all the logins for my Veeam account, my Veeam service account, right? Why is this important whenever it comes to security? Because during IRs, we've watched threat actors go after your backup account. They go right for that Veeam service account. Why? It's typically DAA, because it has to back up all of your servers. It has access to all of your servers, all of them, right? So they're going to go right after that in a lot of instances. And not just Veeam, any backup service name, right? They're going to go right after that for that exact reason. So whenever we document this, what ends up happening is we start documenting this, we write all of that, and then what we can do is we can take that and turn it into alerts. So the alerts start writing themselves now, right? So for example, I should only ever see logins for my Veeam server or my Veeam proxy servers. Well, if I ever see my Veeam service account log in from a domain controller, that's problematic, right? Boom, that's an alert. That's a super high fidelity alert. Alert on a non-standard login type. So login type 1, login type 5, login type 7, whatever it is. Login type, if you are only seeing network login 3, type 3, alert on everything else. If you're seeing non-standard login auth types, you know, maybe I start to see NTLM v1s. Okay, alert, right? Dig into that. Let's find the source of that. Why is that doing that? And then non-standard domain name. What if you're using a local account for your backups? If you see somebody trying to log in with a Veeam account with a domain, that could be unusual, or vice versa. If you're using a domain service account and somebody's trying to log in with a Veeam account that's local, problematic. And then also, again, going back to that whole idea that you're going to have X amount of logins correlated to those service accounts. This is where things get a little bit trickier, though. Whenever it comes to backups, think about it this way. You don't want to have too many false positives. So let's say I have 10 servers, 2 backups a day, 20 successful backups. Let's just say I have 20 successful logins for argument's sake here. I have 20 successful logins every 24 hours. Do I want to alert on 21? Probably not. Do I want to alert on 22? Probably not. I probably want that threshold to be around the 24, 25, 26, 28 mark. And here's the reason why. If you've ever been in those shoes of a backup administrator or somebody who dealt with backups, what's the first troubleshooting step if your backups fail? Rerun the backup job, right? That could be legitimate. What we're looking for, though, is what if somebody logs in from the wrong location? What if somebody starts logging in and daisy chaining around my network? They've logged in 35 times with that account. Now, all of a sudden, boom, our alerts are going off. That's what we're doing. We're limiting down the amount of kind of capability that a threat actor would have before our alerts go off, right? So we're really honing in and tightening down the possibilities of things that they could do outside of, you know, most people, most organizations that I walk into do not have any of this stuff in place, right? So if they did, especially whenever I come in during IR, it could have been very, very early indications that something was off, right? Because they're going to use your Veeam account, let's say that's the example here. They're going to log in as your Veeam account, and they don't just go straight to ransomware 95% of the time. They want to understand your business. They want to know where are your backups. Can I encrypt your backups? Can I make it so you can't recover, right? So they're going to be jumping around your environment, and that's a key component here, right? That's what we're trying to identify. Guess what? If you have any account in your environment, whether it be a service account, whether it be a user account, everything I just described you can do again. So you can repeat that whole entire thing that we just did for backups, and you can break up your environment. You could do it against service accounts. You can do it against your admin accounts. You can do it against your power users. You can do it against your general masses everyday user accounts. You can break it up even more. You can break it up less. All it takes is for you to just pull that into a dashboard and start reviewing that data. You will find all kinds of fun trends. You'll get alert capabilities inside of there. You can do things like you can create alerts based around how many devices a single user logs in from a day, right? So how many unique IP addresses or unique devices a user logs in with. You can have it set to 5. You can have it set to 10, whatever, and then all of a sudden, if they start logging in from a bunch of unique locations within a given workday, you get an alert. That's really powerful. So those are the types of things that you'll want to dig into as part of that process. And you'll want to really, really hone down towards. So we're coming up on the end here. These are all the references I kind of talked about at the beginning. NetBait is that tool set that my friend put together. It's a very cool tool. It is, I believe, also PowerShell. Phantombyte is my tool set that'll help you do GPO OS hardening. And it goes that's just a little website I actually built for this. It's where I'm going to host all of the walkthrough guides. So I'm going to have a walkthrough guide for everything that I showed here and even more. So like, for example, how to actually implement each individual OS hardening technique manually. You can use the Phantombyte piece, but just know and understand it'll have all of the details around, what are some problems you might run into, etc. So there's going to be all of those resources will be out there on that website, free to use. Just really, again, I did it all for this talk. So, but with that being said, I really appreciate everyone's time. I appreciate you spending this time with me, and I really hope that you got something out of this and you can walk away and put some of these tactics and techniques in place. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time, and I hope you have a wonderful day.